My name is Zach Henderson, and this is Megapixels Digital. Today, we're going to be talking about Capture One Pro 20, and specifically how to use the organizational tools available in Capture One 20, as well as getting an overview of how the software works and its look and feel. So hopefully by the end of the video, you're able to understand how to navigate through Capture One, get an idea of its workflow, and be ready to import images into a Capture One catalog or a session and start editing your files. When you first open up Capture One, you're probably going to be introduced to catalogs. That's how they tend to like to start people with the software. If you've already started using catalogs, that's totally fine. I'm going to start with sessions because this is kind of the foundation of how Capture One was originally created and is unique to Capture One. So even if you're using catalogs now, sessions may be beneficial to you in the future because you don't necessarily have to choose one or the other. You can use them both at the same time, and I'll show you how to do that in a later video. But for now, let's go ahead and create a new session. So the first thing I'm going to do is come up to File and click New Session. We're going to be asked a few things right off the bat in this new window that pops up, including the name of the session. Sessions are kind of meant to be used on a per shoot basis. So if today we were photographing headshots for a company, we would name the session something to do with headshots for that company. Today I'm just going to name this session Brand New Session. Okay, and below that it's going to ask me where I would like to put the session. Where should everything be placed? Now your session will likely include all of your raw files, so bear that in mind. As long as you don't put the session on your desktop, you're generally going to be okay. You can put you can put the session on an external hard drive and work off of it from there, but for best performance you're going to want to put it somewhere on your local hard drive that's not your desktop. So pictures, documents, shared folder, that's a fine place too. Really doesn't matter. For my purposes, I'm going to leave it in the pictures folder. Below that section, we have a series of fields that say Capture Selects, Output, and Trash. Those are all folders that are going to be created on your operating system when you make this new session. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. I've already named a session this before, so I'm going to name, instead of Brand New Session, I'm going to name it Brand Spankin' New Session. I'm going to click OK. So this is what Capture One looks like when you first open up a session. There are no images associated with it yet, so there are no pictures in here. On the far left-hand side, we see the Library tool tab. These tool tabs at the top left-hand corner work from a left-to-right philosophy. So we're at the very beginning of our shoot. We're at the very beginning of starting to look at images, so we're on the far left-hand side. By the end of things, we're going to be over on the right-hand side in the Output or the Processing tool tab or the Recipes tool tab. So that's going to be at the end of the shoot. So again, left to right, we're starting on the left. In the folder icon, we see this section that says Session Folders, Capture Selects, Output, and Trash. These folders correspond directly to a set of folders on your operating system, and I'll show you that now. If I right-click on the Capture folder and select Show in Finder, Capture One is going to show me, or will bring up the Finder window of exactly where that folder lives on my operating system. Obviously, this is a Mac-based tutorial. For all my PC users, the concepts are the same. The idea, though, is that, again, it's this Capture folder in Capture One is the Capture folder that is listed here. There's nothing magical about this folder. They're not special, really, in any way. This is simply a folder that's right next to the .cosession.db file, which is essentially the session interface. But again, there's nothing special about these folders. That's going to be helpful a little bit later because when we import these images into Capture One, into the Capture folder, they can be moved freely between Capture, Output, Selects, and Trash on your operating system, and Capture One, the interface, the actual Capture One we're used to seeing, will totally understand what's happening. All Capture One ever is really doing in a session is it's looking inside of folders and it's showing you what is inside of any individual folder at any given time. Typically, it's going to show you what's inside the Capture folder because that's just sort of by default the way it likes to work. But there's another way to use it. You can also use the Capture One session like a browser, sort of like Adobe Bridge. In the System Folders section at the bottom here, we can start to expand the Macintosh HD folder. So as I expand this, I'm going to point Capture One to my desktop because there's one raw file on the desktop that I want Capture One to look at. So I'm going to expand Macintosh HD until I find the user class, which is the username I'm using now. and I'm going to click on desktop. And so what Capture One is doing is it's understanding that, yes, there's a raw file on your desktop. I haven't been introduced to it yet, but I'm being introduced to it now. So here's a preview of it. By the way, another Capture One session has seen this file in the past, and it's adjusted it. It's made some crop adjustments, it's made some color adjustments, and I can show those to you too. That's great, because that's, again, it's that physical folder-based organization that makes sessions so powerful. In another session totally unrelated to this one, I put this raw file here, and since I put it there, any other session can see that image on the desktop and understand what previous sessions have done to it. That's because if I were to show this in Finder, we can see that this is the raw file that lives on my desktop, but there's also a Capture One folder right next to it. The idea behind this Capture One folder is that it's housing all of the preview files, the thumbnail files, and all of the settings that have been performed on this image. All of the adjustments that have been made to this image all exist within this Capture One folder that's right next to the raw file. You never really have to access this folder. This isn't really that important to get to yourself, but it is useful to know that that's how sessions work. So anytime you point a Capture One session to a file like on an external hard drive, you might start to see these little Capture One folders pop up everywhere. Again, that's because that's Capture One's way of understanding what that raw file has seen before, what Capture One has done to this raw file before, and again, without ever having to import anything. So even it works across multiple computers as well. So if you have a single hard drive, but two separate computers with Capture One, each can look at that specific file and see the changes that the other has made, because all of that information is housed in that single Capture One folder that's right next to the raw file. This guy right here, that houses everything. And that's why multiple sessions can see all of the changes made to this raw file. The raw file is never adjusted. The raw file is never touched. All of the information is housed right next to it. And it's a little bit cleaner looking than a Sidecar XMP file. I much prefer this system. It keeps things very clean, very simple, and I love that. So you don't have to import images into a session, but you certainly can. And the reason why you would do that is if you just prefer working in sessions and you enjoy that kind of workflow, or if you're tethering into a session. So if you've got a camera and you've connected it to your computer and you want the files from your camera to go straight to your computer, then in that case, a session is perfect for that, and you're probably going to be sending images into the capture folder. You can get really sophisticated with how you use that organization and choosing new capture destinations, but it's kind of outside the scope of this video. We'll do another one later about how that works. But yeah, there is certainly plenty of reasons to import images into Capture One, but it mostly has to do with organization and the fact that all of the images inside of a particular session are housed in the same folder, in the same place. All of the images, all of its adjustments, all of the original raw files, the selects that you've made, the output files, so your TIFF, JPEG, PSDs, and all of the trash from that shoot, all of that is in one place. And that's within the parent session folder that you created when you created the session. So again, it's this physical organization that once you start to see how it works, it really can click and can really be beneficial in a lot of different ways. So that's a session. Sessions are great. Catalogs are also really useful. I find myself using catalogs more and more. There's a reason for that. Sessions are shoot-based, and they're designed to hold a few thousand images. Catalogs, on the other hand, can be genre-based, yearly-based. They can house everything you've ever shot, and you can have many tens of thousands of images associated with a catalog. The benefit to that is that you can search within that catalog and have any number of keywords and filtered color ratings, tags to find specific images that you shot years ago, and differentiate between images that don't have anything to do with each other. All of that's why you use catalogs, but they work in very different ways to sessions. So let's talk about that now. I'm going to start by making a brand new catalog. So I'm going to click File, New Catalog, and it's going to ask me to name it. So I'll just name it Brand New Catalog. And it's going to ask me again, like the session, where I want to put it. So it's going to ask me to put it in the pictures folder. Even more than a session, it's important to keep the catalog on your local hard drive. You don't want to put the catalog on an external hard drive. The very best performance is going to be locally. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So in a session, when you open it up for the first time, you see no images selected. When you open a catalog for the first time, you're met with this little icon that is basically commanding you to import images. That's because for any file to be associated with a catalog, it has to first be imported into the catalog. So let's go ahead and do that now. I'm going to click Import Images, and now if we look on the left-hand side, we're going to import from source. So source is, right now it's training images. This is a folder on a hard drive. This could also be an SD card or a CF card. But we're choosing the source that the files are coming from. And now we're looking at import to, where are these files going? So importing to current location essentially just means leaving the files where they are. They're not going to be duplicated, no copies. Capture One is simply just building a path. Basically just telling a Capture One catalog that these files exist and you'd like them to talk to each other. That's all there is to it. So that's import to current location, no duplicates. For files that are already in a hierarchy that you've designated, that you've made, just import them like this and you're going to be set, and you're going to be using the catalog the way it's meant to be used. If you expand this drop-down menu, there's another option that says Inside Catalog. I highly recommend against importing images inside the catalog. I'll show you what I mean by that. I'm going to input one image, actually I'll put a couple images inside the catalog. So I'm going to highlight these two thumbnails. I'm going to put the destination to Inside Catalog, and then I'm going to select Import to Images. So the files get copied the way they're supposed to. They were originally in a folder on an external hard drive, and now they're literally inside of the catalog on my computer. So now there's two versions of them. On the left-hand side, we see recent imports and the date. So today is April 6th, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. We'll get into the deeper forms of organization in a catalog in a second, but for right now, I want you to see where these files actually live. So if you remember when we were talking about sessions, I could right-click one of these images and I could select Show in Finder. Well, if I right-click a thumbnail and try to select Show in Finder, it won't let me. I can't actually see this file in the operating system like I could with a session. Whereas a session is really highly dependent on physical organization and can be accessed from within or from outside and inside Capture One. To look at a file that you've imported inside the catalog, you have to open that catalog, and that could be a problem. So I fortunately know where this file actually lives on the operating system, and I'll show you. So if I go into Finder, if I go into my Pictures folder, which is where I place this catalog, and I look and I click Brand New Catalog, instead of this hierarchy of folders that makes sense, like Capture, Selects, Output, and Trash, we're met with a catalog package. This catalog package is not meant to be peered into, but I can. If I right-click Brand New Catalog and I select Show Package Contents, we see inside of the catalog. Now, this is not something we're not really meant to do. This is all just for Capture One. So if we start poking around originals, there's 2020, 04, 06, 1, 0. That's just two images worth of really nonsensical. There is a rhyme and reason to it, but it's not very clear, and it becomes really tedious when you've got 10,000 images that you've imported inside the catalog, and you're trying to find them in this way. You're trying to find the raw file, in an emergency or something. It's not going to happen. So that's why I really highly recommend, if we go back to our import dialog, instead of importing images inside the catalog, you either leave them in their current location, which is where they are on whatever hard drive that you're happy with their organizational style, so they're already where they need to be. Or if you're importing from a CF card and you're choosing the folder, so you click on that destination dropdown And instead of inside catalog or current location, you select choose folder. And so that will actually copy, I'm going to hit cancel, that will actually copy the files from the source to the location that you've determined. So that's if you're importing, again, from like a CF card or an SD card. The key point to take away here is please to not use the inside catalog option. If something were to happen to that catalog, if it were to become corrupted or accidentally deleted without having been backed up, you could potentially lose your raw files. Nobody wants that. So leaving them in their current location, or again, copying them from a CF card and placing them in a folder of your choice in the hierarchy that you've determined, that's how a catalog should really be used. And that's called a referenced catalog versus a stored catalog. Always want to be referenced. So I'm going to just go ahead and import all of these images, but I'm going to leave them in their current location because I'm importing them from another hard drive. I'm selecting import 11 images, and here they are. So now we have two separate imports because we imported two images inside the catalog, which is a no-no. And then we have above it the most recent import at 5:33 p.m. And that's in the recent import section of the catalog collections. So unlike sessions that are completely physical, folder-based organization, catalogs are entirely virtual organization. While you can use the folders section to see what files are associated, what folders on your operating system are associated with the images inside the catalog, it's not like a session where you can expand a bunch of folders and find specifically where a file is and tell Capture One to look at it. It's sort of the opposite, is that you've imported images to the catalog and now you can see where they physically live using the folders section on the left-hand side. The catalog behaves the exact same way as the session, except for this library folder on the far left-hand side of this tool tab. Everything else stays the same. The only other thing you really need to know right now about catalogs is that the organization that it uses is virtual, and that they're called collections. This collection-based organization is pretty handy. I found, so in my personal use, I have catalogs per genre. So my landscape catalog is easily my largest, and so I'll show you how I organize my landscape catalog, and maybe that will give you some ideas about how you might start organizing your catalog. So under user collections, I click on the plus button here, so I'm going to create a new group. The group is like the largest container, if you will, of virtual organization for a catalog. So this is the broadest aspect. So in my landscape catalog, I make a group based off of a country. So I'll say USA for this collection name. So this is that's a project, or excuse me, that's a group. I can then take that, I can go down one step and I say, all right, in the country, I'm going to make a project, or excuse me, I'm going to make another group named state. So for example, I'll type in Utah. And yes, you can have groups within groups if you'd like to. Inside of that state, I'm now going to create a project. And the project is going to be named Arches National Park. Okay. And inside of that project, I'm going to create an album. An album is the actual thing that will contain images. Projects and groups are purely organizational. Albums, on the other hand, they actually are associated with files. That being said, the album is still virtual organization. So you can move one file between albums that are housed in different projects, whatever it is, doesn't matter. No file has actually physically moved on your operating system. It's all virtual. So in this album, I'll probably name something like in a feature of Arches National Park. So I'll say Delicate Arch. And so this is then the structure that we see. So if I'm going to go back up to my recent imports that happened at 5:33 p.m. Ironically, if I had thought about this at all, I would have had an image that is of Arches, or that is of Delicate Arch, but I don't in this set. So I'm just going to pretend like this is Delicate Arch, even though this is Monument Valley. But I'm going to simply, because I'm in recent imports, I can see these images, and I'm just going to right click and drag over into Delicate Arch. Now Delicate Arch has a 1 next to it. If I look at that album, boom, there's Delicate Arch. And so let's say I have another image of Delicate Arch that I imported years ago. Well, I can get back to that recent import and I can drag that file into Delicate Arch. Now I have 2 files associated with Delicate Arch. Again, you're not moving physical files around. It's just ways of accessing the same file. Let's say, for example, that I have another album inside of Arches National Park named, let's just say, Rocks. So I have 2 albums inside of Arches National Park. One says Delicate Arch and one says Rocks. Well, Delicate Arch, again, this is not Delicate Arch. So if we say that this image also needs to be associated with another album, all we have to do is drag it. No matter how we're looking at it, we can drag it into another album. And now this image can be accessed by looking through either of these albums. Again, you're not copying files anywhere. It's just you're developing ways of looking at a specific file. Now this organization, you can kind of see how it works. It doesn't have to be like this. You can have albums right next to projects. You can have albums right next to groups. They do start to behave a little bit differently. Projects, for example, if you have a smart album, it's only going to look within the project that it's inside of. Whereas if a smart album is outside of a project, it's going to look across all images across the entire catalog. Little things like that are kind of goofy, but they are useful. And once you start to see how they can be useful and how they can be used to organize and find one image within thousands of images, if you understand like one little piece of information about a file in a catalog, chances are you're going to be able to find it, and without having to access and use that somewhat tedious system folders structure like in Sessions. You're trying to point it to different folders. You can find images that way, but if it's all been associated with a catalog, you can do it through the interface, and it's so much easier. Again, just as long as you're using a referenced catalog and all those raw files live on an external hard drive or wherever in a hierarchy that makes sense to you, that's what's important. And you can use the catalog to look at images, adjust images, do whatever you need to find them, as long as you know where to find them, where they actually live. That's what's really important. So there are benefits to using both Sessions and catalogs. The last thing I'll show you is how you might import a session into a catalog. So first, I'm going to go back to my session. Now, the session that I made, I never imported anything into the capture folder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to where I have the files on my system, and I'm literally just going to highlight everything, and I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it directly into the capture folder. So just put everything in, and I'm in the capture folder now in the session, and you see immediately as soon as I've done that, it's building previews. Capture One is building previews of all of these files. And not only is it building previews, but we can see it start to realize, there's a Capture One folder next to you. Oh, I have edits that I can apply to these images. So without even ever having to go to the import dialog, I can just copy and paste into the capture folder in a session, and then boom, that's where everything is. Never even having to access this if I don't want to. So again, you see that it's that physical folder-based organization that makes Sessions sing like that. So right now I have images inside the capture folder, and I've made a few adjustments to these before. So I'm happy with this session. All of these images are in the capture folder that I want. That's great. So now I want to bring this session into a catalog. Okay. So whereas a session might be perfect for a shoot-based system, so you're on location, you're tethering into Capture One, and so you've created a session to do that. You make organization, you make favorite folders, you start tagging and colorating images and organizing them in that way. after you're done with that session and you're back at the office, you can import that session into a larger catalog. So if you're using your catalog to organize thousands and thousands of images, and you want to keep all of the organization that you used in that session when you were on site, simply importing the session into the catalog is going to give you all of the same organization that you used in the session, but now it's totally in the catalog. And it can be referenced against all the rest of the images that are already in there. I'll show you how to do it. So I'm going to go back to my catalog, so brand new catalog, and I'm going to click File, Import Session. Then, this is why it's important to understand where your files are on the operating system. So I know that the session I'm named, or the session that I'm importing is named brand spanking new session. So I'm gonna, in the dialog box, I'm gonna expand until I've found the brand spanking new session .cosessiondb file. This is the file that I'm after when I'm importing a session into a catalog. Because again, that file is sort of the essence of the session. That's all of the, it's not all of the adjustments, but it is the organization, and it also understands that it's containing files and it's containing images. So I'm going to go ahead and click import. So if we look on the left hand side, two things happen. We see a new recent import section, April 6th at 5:43 p.m. And we have a new project named brand spanking new session. If we expand that project, we have groups and albums. So a group of session folders with the albums, capture, selects, output, and trash. These are the same images that were in the capture folder in the session. Now the thing to understand about this is that after I've imported the session into the catalog, the files have stayed where they are. The files still exist in the capture folder of that session. I'll prove it to you. If we look in our pictures folder, brand spanking new session, inside of the capture folder, all of those files are still there. So the idea then is if you go out and you use a session to tether into, or if you've imported images into a session and you plan on later importing that session into a catalog, you need to place the session in its final resting place before importing into the catalog. Because at this point, they're not going to sync up anymore. After you've imported the session into the catalog, then you're going to be working on the images in the catalog from now on. You can continue working on them in the session, but they're not going to speak to each other. So really, after importing the session into the catalog and taking advantage of all of its organizational tools, that's kind of where it lives from now on. But still has the benefit of being self-contained all within that parent session file. You just got to make sure that it's where you want it to be at the end of the day. Because the catalog-based system works via reference, if you move a file outside of the catalog, then it's not going to be able to understand where it was anymore, and it's going to have an offline logo. If I can point you to that here, if I go to back to that session folder, brand spanking new session, oops, there we go in the capture folder. So the file I'm looking for is Zach Henderson 749. And if I take that and it's XMP, which for some reason I've allowed XMPs to stay with it. If I drag that outside of the capture folder where it currently is, the session won't really care that much, but the catalog immediately registered it as offline and says, I have no idea where this file is. It was in my capture folder. Now I don't have any clue. So I can put it back inside the capture folder. It'll repair that connection. So that's kind of how sessions and catalogs work together. Hopefully you found this useful. If you want, you can use only sessions. If you want, you can use only catalogs. It really doesn't matter. You can use them together. But knowing how each of them works and what the strengths and weaknesses are of each is really important. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you in the next video. Have a good one.